You're
Hi,
welcome.
everybody. Yes, hello. So today we are faculty and staff professional development. Today will be Nancy Winters. She'll be presenting on research. It starts with a question: developing and conducting meaningful research and collaboratively. I think that's the focus here. So I will leave it to Nancy to get started.
Thank you for your interest in this professional development topic. I believe that working collaboratively on projects is a great way to expand the creativity of a project, and at the same time, it helps to decrease the workload of everyone involved. So without further ado, let's get started. To start our conversation today, I thought it important to discuss clinical inquiry as it's the foundation of all projects using and creating research. Clinical inquiry includes research and research-related activities such as evidence-based practice, quality improvement, and program evaluation. While interconnected, all these have distinct purposes but similar expected outcomes, which is basically to solve a problem or to improve care. All forms, regardless of the type, are equally as important. Because we're also intimately involved in program evaluation efforts as part of our roles as educators, I'm not going to focus on that as part of today's presentation. However, it's important to realize that evaluation starts with a question too. For example, when we do our own evaluations, we're often asking questions like, are our students meeting our expected outcomes for our courses? For the remainder of the presentation, I'll focus on evidence-based practice, quality improvement, and research. Research is a systematic inquiry using scientific methods to answer questions. It's meant to generate new knowledge through rigorous processes utilizing many different methods and designs to investigate and explore data. This is knowledge production or knowledge generation. It seeks to create knowledge which can be generalizable to multiple populations. One of the major challenges seen in healthcare is the slow process of implementation of knowledge into practice. This is also known as the knowledge practice gap. Some say, what good is the creation of new knowledge if it never is implemented? And I agree. But I do think that if we all work together to help create environments where knowledge is not only generated but utilized, that we can make a difference. Researchers suggest that to speed up the use of knowledge, collaborative research is essential. While research seeks for discovery of knowledge that can be generalizable to multiple populations, evidence-based practice projects are used to improve one organization or one unit within an organization or one population. It's a problem-solving approach which requires a systematic literature review and critical appraisal of relevant evidence, often from research, specifically to answer a clinical question. This type of project translates best available evidence into practice with the intention of influencing some sort of an outcome. It requires the integration of one's own clinical expertise and patients' preferences and values. This typically begins with a clinical question developed as either a PICO or a PCOT, and this is followed by an extensive review of the literature. Evidence-based practice is often conceptualized as a three-legged stool. Each of the three legs work together and are equally as important. Like evidence-based practice projects, quality improvement projects are also used to improve one organization or one unit within an organization or one population. This is the translation of knowledge from research into clinical practice to improve the quality of healthcare. Quality improvement is also often referred to as performance improvement and involves a cyclical process by which organizations work to achieve goals and outcomes. This is typically a rapid cycle of performance and evaluation to continually evaluate workflow and processes until a desired outcome is achieved. Often we refer to these rapid cycles as PDQA or PDCA. There's many other names too, but for the purpose of this presentation, I used PDCA. All nurses, no matter their educational level, are responsible for participation in clinical inquiry, research consumption, and translation. So how do we decide how to approach answering our clinical questions? Well, based on the question, we make some decisions about what's currently being done. Is what's currently being done a sacred cow that is just done because everyone is comfortable with it? Is there a possibility that there's a better way to do things? To answer these questions, a review of the literature is required. If upon review of the literature you find that the way things are being done is the best practice, then you begin a continuous quality improvement project. Continuously attempting to climb that hill of improvement through rapid cycle PDQA, or whatever model you choose, to improve the current practice. If upon your literature review you find that there is evidence to suggest changing the way things are being done, well then you perform an evidence-based practice project. This is, you implement the change in practice, and then of course evaluate the change to see if outcomes improved. This is not research. This is evaluation, and this is going to be important later when we discuss IRB. Now, if upon your review of the literature you find that no evidence exists to improve the current practice or very limited evidence, then a research study should be considered. Regardless of the type of clinical inquiry, it all starts with a question. Some sort of burning question that typically starts with a very broad topic and eventually narrows down to a succinct question after much literature review, reflection, and communication. I'll use an example from a collaborative project I did with a fellow colleague. The colleague was teaching health assessment to undergraduate nursing students. Health assessment was taken in conjunction with the student's first clinical course, Fundamentals in Nursing. I was teaching the second clinical course, Med-Surg Nursing. I was noticing that my Med-Surg students in the clinical setting were clueless of how to actually perform a health assessment, despite having just passed health assessment the semester prior. It was really bothering me, so I scheduled a meeting with my colleague to discuss exactly what the students were learning in health assessment to educate myself on what the students should know. Through our discussions, I suggested that we partner and collaborate on a student project to look at improving health assessment skills in our students. At this point, when collaborating, you may want to consider collaborating with someone with experience related to the topic of interest. While I have tons of experience teaching both health assessment and also conducting health assessments myself in the clinical setting, to gain buy-in on my study and my processes and the things that might come out of the findings of the study, it was important to consider collaborating with the health assessment instructor. And our idea was that we start narrowing down on this broad topic of health assessment to how can we make these students become more competent in health assessment skills. And eventually narrowing down a little bit further to, well, what are some of the strategies to improve competence in health assessment skills? There are different types of collaborations, those having similar interests and topics working together, and also sometimes there is the idea of collaborating for mentorship in the process. So this colleague in particular was very new to research and appreciated the fact that I came to her and was including her in this project idea. But it's a great idea that once you decide to bring in a collaborator, that you work together to develop the final question. This is because it might change several times through discussions based on your expertise, your collaborating partner's expertise, the interests of the team together. However, your broad focus should stay the same. So let's just talk for a few minutes about the collaborative team. Everyone comes to the table with different skills. For example, I'm not a great writer, but I'm pretty good at developing ideas and processes to get to an end result. Partnering with individuals that have the skills you may need to be successful in your project is key to progress, creativity, and success. The complementary skills of all members on the team are beneficial to all aspects of the project development process. For example, if time constraints is an issue, gaining partners to help with things like literature review is great. Or perhaps you're interested in developing a project which involves pediatric nurses, but you're an orthopedic nurse. Collaborating with a pediatric nurse will give you access to a whole new group of participants and different creative ideas. Or perhaps you need to collaborate with someone from a geographic perspective, or a subject matter expert, or someone who has the resources that you're interested in but have no access to. These are all great reasons to collaborate. Doing so creates less work for all members of the team as the work is distributed. It's important, though, that all members have a shared vision. Members should have agreement on the questions, methods, and approaches to answer those questions. Not all research requires collaboration, but when it does, the primary researcher usually takes the lead and needs to be very cognizant of the needs of the team. You need to work in unison to get to the end result, which is a successful project. As mentioned prior, it's really important that the leader is identified early. This is to avoid friction. Even if there is a co-investigator, which is usually the case in large studies, one person is still assigned the leadership role and becomes the go-to person for all problems and questions related to the project. They're the go point. This is typically the primary investigator, and this person must understand and consider the boundaries and needs of the team. This person will help determine the meeting schedule and timeline for progress and keep the team on track with deadlines. The biggest responsibility of the leader is to develop clear role expectations and to define each member's responsibility. The leader needs to manage accountability from the beginning to avoid a tug of war. One big topic to discuss with regard to collaborative projects involves plans for publication. Conflict can arise if authorship is not clearly identified at the beginning of the project. That is, the order of authorship. This is much more of a problem when there are large collaborative groups, but it can be a problem with as little as 4 individuals. To explain why, I created citations and references for 20 of our faculty. So if the 20 of us collaborated in research and I was the primary author, our citations would look like this for APA, it would look like this for AMA, and like this for MLA. Then, of course, the references would look as follows. While to some this may not be an issue, others may be offended that their name does not appear in the work without actually obtaining the article. To maintain a cohesive team, authorship should be agreed upon in writing ahead of time. I cannot stress enough the in writing piece. Guidelines for assigning authorship should be based on level of contribution to the work. If someone in the collaborative group decides to leave the group, this should also be done in writing, and this person should state that they no longer plan to participate and that they relinquish their authorship related to the study. Sometimes there may be some faculty-student collaborations on projects. These collaborations follow all the same processes mentioned, but in the case there is usually an unequal effort in the collaborative process. This is because students do not have the knowledge and expertise to carry out the project alone. To account for this, faculty should clearly define the roles of the student and the faculty early on, and also discuss authorship. It's my philosophy that if the work was the student's idea, that the student should be the primary author. However, I will require the student to write the first and second draft of the manuscript, and then I'll do edits. For research, the student can do the literature review, the gap identification, research purpose, question, hypotheses, and help with the whole design. But perhaps I'll do the part of the data analysis. Whatever the roles are, it's really important that you, as the expert, provide clear expectations. Using a summary table is a very helpful way to organize literature on a topic. While an annotated bibliography is great to gain an overview of the full findings, using a summary table is great to keep concise details about multiple articles. When my colleague and I collaborated on the health assessment article, this is the type of table that we used. We placed this in Google Docs, and we both worked for them simultaneously so that we didn't duplicate findings. In this type of a table, you would provide just bullet points of key findings. So I often find it helpful to use both a summary table and an annotated bibliography. So back to our exemplar question about finding strategies to improve competency in health assessment skills. Once I chose to collaborate with my colleague, the next step was the literature review that we did using that summary table and the annotated bibliography that I described on the previous slide. When we did our review of the literature, we found that there was little to no evidence of strategies, so we looked outside of nursing and discovered mastery learning theory and mastery learning techniques. Ultimately, together, we decided on a research question to go forward with for our final research study. Decisions related to what methods to utilize for research stem directly from your research question. For example, if you're interested in understanding a phenomenon from the perspective of others, or to understand what something feels like, or what it's like to experience something, or even to observe the flow of something, then a qualitative approach should be used. If instead you're looking to compare things or correlate and measure things quantitatively, then a quantitative approach is appropriate. This is, of course, assuming that there's not already evidence, as discussed earlier, as if there is evidence, then you should be considering an evidence-based practice project or a QI project based on the guidelines provided. For collaboration, all members of the team should be able to agree on the method as it stems directly from the question. Once the methods are decided upon, all members of the team should collaboratively decide on the exact protocol that will be designed to recruit, sample, collect data, and analyze data. This should be developed by all parties of the team so that everyone knows the entire process. Then, of course, the leader should clearly define the roles of the members to get the process done. When considering IRB, it's important to remember that ethical review was initially developed with randomized control trials in mind, where individuals are randomly assigned to specific intervention groups for true experiments to occur. However, quality improvement and evidence-based practice projects are really much different. Their core objective is the integration of evidence, or the integration of best practices and quality improvement. There are three schools of thought on review of these types of projects and whether or not they should need to undergo institutional review. The first thought is that they're not research, that they do not involve innovative interventions, but rather they involve usual care and typically pose no more than minimal risk. Such projects are designed specifically to bring about improvement in a setting from already done research. The second school of thought is that these types of projects are research, but they should be exempt from review as they pose only minimal risk, and that the data that is collected is that which is usually typically already being collected in that setting, which is usually anonymized. The last view is that these projects are part of learning healthcare system and that we really need to start thinking about whether or not new types of ethical frameworks for review should be considered in the future. This presentation is not a review of IRB protocols. I believe that Catherine Cortuccio has previously presented quite nicely on this topic already. However, I would just want to add that quality improvement and evidence-based practice projects, when attempting to publish findings from any of these, journals are requiring proof of approval. So therefore, submitting for review, in most cases, they're going to be exempt anyway, but you really should submit all projects for review just to get that letter, just in case you decide to publish. However, publication alone does not designate the level of review. It's the level of that's proportionate to the risk to the participants that makes that determination. These are the items that are required for submitting a protocol to the IRB for approval. There's some others depending on the type of project you're planning, such as if you're conducting research on with other institutions or using prisoners or children's, etc. But these are the most frequently used. If you're planning a project, you should visit the Institutional Review Board site to review the forms and guidelines. Lisa Heimbauer is the chair of the IRB, and her contact information is also located on that site. With regard to collaboration efforts, the IRB application process can be time-consuming. It's important to remember that all details on the application should align with the appendices, and they should be described very carefully in your protocol. Therefore, it's a good idea to first complete the recruitment materials, choose your tools, create your emails and your forum scripts, etc. This can be divided among the collaborators and then schedule an appointment to convene to discuss. Together, you need to carefully think about the step-by-step processes of the procedures to make sense, make sure that everything makes sense, and to really help everybody understand what those steps are and to be sure that these steps are going to get you to the point of answering your research question. The application should be the last portion completed, and it should be completed by one person on the team. Of course, before submitting to the IRB for approval, the team should all read the packet of content to agree that the protocol is appropriate, that ethical things are considered, that the human subjects are protected, and that all the required content is included before it's submitted. Your IRB application clearly outlines all the research activities and the step-by-step processes you will follow. There are often many activities going on at a single time during the phases of the study, but all activities surrounding the study should be followed as detailed in the protocol, and any deviations should be explained in detail and provided as an addendum. All members of the collaborative team should follow exactly the protocol that has been set up. This reduces the chances of mistakes being made, which can really impact the results of the study. It also ensures consistency in the ways that the data are collected and also the ways that the data is analyzed. Anyone stepping into the study should be able to repeat the steps of the protocol by following what you have written step by step. Doing so is important to develop credibility of your findings and also credibility of you as a researcher. I just want to take a minute to discuss the image on this slide. I've often heard novice researchers discussing tweaking the way that they're collecting data or parts of the results in order to obtain better results. This is not acceptable. Non-significant findings are also important results in research. Non-significance is not failure. It's not something that you hide away in the drawer for nobody to hear about. Non-significance just means that there is insufficient evidence to show a statistically significant difference or relationship. Readers still have a right to know that the procedures were followed as reported. It's also important to realize that while there may be no statistical significance in findings, it does not mean that there is no difference in findings. There could still be differences, like older nurses have higher levels of confidence than younger nurses, but the difference just weren't statistically significant. Don't hide them away in the drawer, and don't change your protocols. The write-up phase is the fun part. Not for me, but maybe for some of you. But the good part is that the leader can draw on the strengths of other members of the team. Some may be good at organizing and others great at editing. You should move through the strengths of the members of your team to help to make that process as easy as possible and make your work as strong as possible. The first step in the phase is finding a journal which is appropriate for your study. You want to make sure that your study fits into the scope of the journal. For example, the study on health assessment that I discussed in this presentation really would not fit into the Journal of Emergency Nursing. You should browse the content that is published by a journal, look for quality and relevance to your work, and then also review the quality of their website. See what tools they provide for authors. You could also consider the impact factor, the journal rank, article influence, and the H-index to determine the impact of the journal. These are determinations based on the citation rate for articles published in that journal. Once you decide on a journal, then prepare your report based on the guidelines for publication described by that specific journal. Again, the leader should assign specific roles, provide deadlines, and in the end, the manuscript should be written in one voice. So one person should put the pieces together and then, of course, bring it back to the team for final approval. As healthcare providers and educators, it's our responsibility to continuously support and promote a culture of clinical inquiry in ourselves and in our students. Let's collaboratively create environments where we are expanding scholarship to include our own use of quality improvement, evidence-based practice, and research to enhance student learning. I hope that this presentation was helpful in some way, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me.